You're watching Northern Crimes.
Alaska is a big place. Big rivers, big mountains, big country, and big crime. In fact, Alaska's violent crime rate remains far above the national average. According to a story by Alaska Public Media, Alaska saw a 67% increase in murders in 2022. Additionally, the state is also known for high rates of sexual assault, domestic violence, and suicide. Although Alaska has always been a place where people come to live out their dreams, it's also a place where people come to do very bad things. Today, we'll look at 25 of the most notorious crimes to ever take place in the last frontier, from cold cases and serial killers to strange disappearances and unsolved mysteries. These stories will chill you to the bone and leave you wondering if Alaska is a place you'd ever like to visit or reside. This is Northern Crimes. In 1978, 16-year-old Shelley Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her body found along the Seward Highway in Alaska. Shelley's case went cold for over 4 decades, leaving her family with unanswered questions and deep grief. But in 2019, a breakthrough came when genetic genealogy linked Donald McQuaid to the crime. McQuaid, living in Oregon at the time, was arrested and later convicted. The DNA evidence was crucial in solving this long unsolved murder. During the trial, it was revealed that Shelley had suffered severe injuries, and McQuaid was found guilty of first and second-degree murder. Donald McQuaid was sentenced to 50 years in prison, bringing a measure of justice to Shelley's family. Although it took 46 years, the conviction ensures that Shelley's tragic death will never be forgotten. In 1993, the quiet campus of the University of Alaska Fairbanks was shattered by the brutal murder of 20-year-old Sophie Sergie. Sophie was visiting friends when she disappeared. The next day, her body was found in a dormitory bathroom. Despite extensive investigations, the case went cold for nearly 3 decades. Then, in 2018, a breakthrough came with advanced DNA technology identifying Stephen Downs as the suspect. Downs, who'd lived in the dorm at the time, was linked to the crime through genetic genealogy. In 2019, he was arrested in Maine, where he worked as a nurse. Despite his claims of innocence, the evidence was overwhelming. Stephen Downs was sentenced to 75 years in prison for the murder and assault of Sophie Sergie. After 29 years, justice was finally served, providing some closure to Sophie's family and friends. In 1994, Anchorage, Alaska was rattled by the tragic death of 18-year-old college student Bonnie Craig. Bonnie was last seen in the early morning on her way to catch the bus for her 7 a.m. class. Her body was found later that day in McHugh Creek, initially thought to be a tragic accident. However, Bonnie's mother Karen suspected foul play due to defensive wounds and missing belongings. Years passed, and in 1997, authorities confirmed Bonnie had been attacked. In 2006, a DNA match identified Kenneth Dion as the suspect. At trial, Dion's claim of an accidental death was contradicted by evidence of blunt force injuries and his inconsistent statements. Justice was finally served in 2011 when Dion was sentenced to 124 years in prison. Bonnie's story reminds us of the importance of perseverance in seeking the truth. In May 2003, Anchorage, Alaska was shaken by the mysterious disappearance of 21-year-old Bethany Corriera. Bethany, a college student, vanished from her apartment, her belongings left behind. That same day, a nearby duplex was engulfed in flames. While initial investigations found no link, Detective Glenn Klinkert suspected otherwise. Driven by personal tragedy, he pursued the case relentlessly. Bethany's apartment manager, Michael Lawson, became the prime suspect. Cell phone records and eyewitness accounts placed Lawson near the scene. In February 2004, Lawson's brother confessed that Michael had taken Bethany's life. Bethany's remains were found a year later, bringing a measure of justice. Michael Lawson was convicted in 2007 for second-degree murder, ensuring he could never harm anyone again. The exact details of Bethany's death may remain unknown, but justice was served. In January 2014, Anchorage, Alaska was stunned by the mysterious murder of 31-year-old Robert Hansen. Robert was a fun-loving free spirit known for his love of animals and the outdoors. He disappeared on January 23, 2014, and was found dead in his car the next day in a busy Spenard parking lot. His car window was smashed, and there were few clues at the scene. Despite his family's and the police's efforts, no strong leads have emerged. Robert's sister, Melia Strickler, continues to hope for justice, remembering how her brother loved to take his black cat Ninja everywhere he went. After nearly a decade, Robert Hansen's murder remains unsolved, leaving his family and friends searching for answers. The case is still open, waiting for new information that might finally bring closure. From 1972 to 1983, Anchorage, Alaska was terrorized by a man known as the Butcher Baker, Robert Hansen. Hansen, a local baker and avid hunter, led a double life. He abducted, assaulted, and murdered at least 17 women, often releasing them into the Alaskan wilderness to hunt them down. His heinous crimes went unnoticed until 1983, when 17-year-old Cindy Paulson escaped and provided crucial information to the police. An FBI profile matched Hansen, leading to a search of his home where evidence, including a marked map of burial sites, was found. Hansen eventually confessed to 17 murders in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Hansen was sentenced to life plus 461 years in prison. He died in 2014, leaving behind a legacy of terror and a reminder of the importance of justice. Between 1979 and 1981, Fairbanks, Alaska was haunted by the brutal murders committed by Thomas Richard Bundy, an Air Force sergeant stationed at Eielson Air Force Base. Bundy's victims included young women and girls, with his spree beginning with 19-year-old Glinda Sodeman in 1979 and ending with Lori King in 1981. The murders were characterized by strangulation and gunshot wounds, with bodies often found near the base. Despite early leads and a composite sketch, Bundy evaded capture. In 1983, investigators connected Bundy to the crimes through vehicle descriptions and his history of inappropriate behavior. He confessed to 5 murders but was not immediately arrested due to illegal oversight. Days later, he died in a motorcycle collision, considered a suicide, before he could be formally charged. Though Thomas Richard Bundy's life ended in 1983, his horrific actions left an indelible mark on Fairbanks. The discovery of Doris Oring's remains in 1986 confirmed Bundy's responsibility, bringing some closure to the victims' families. From 2000 to 2007, South Central Alaska was terrorized by the brutal crimes of Joshua Wade. Wade's reign of terror began with the murder of 33-year-old Della Brown in 2000. Despite a trial filled with strong evidence and a weak defense, Wade was acquitted of most charges. His crimes escalated in 2007 when he murdered his neighbor, 52-year-old Mindy Schloss, after robbing her. The use of Schloss's ATM card led to his arrest and eventual conviction. Wade later confessed to additional murders, including 2 Alaska Native men, dating back to 1994. His confessions were part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and serve his sentence in a federal prison. Joshua Wade was sentenced to 99 years in prison. While his confessions provided some closure, many believe he may have left behind a longer trail of victims. On June 14, 2024, Wade was found unresponsive in his cell at the Indiana State Prison and later pronounced dead. An investigation into his death is currently ongoing. In 2016, the city of Anchorage, Alaska was terrorized by a series of murders committed by James Dale Ritchie. Ritchie, a former standout athlete turned criminal, committed his first confirmed murders on July 3, 2016, killing Brianna Foisey and Jason Netter Sr. along a bike path. Later that month, on July 29, he shot 21-year-old Trayvon Kendall Thompson. In August, Ritchie killed Kevin Turner and Bryant DeHusen in Valley of the Moon Park. Despite initial confusion, the police connected the murders through the use of a Colt Python handgun. Ritchie was finally identified following a shootout with police on November 12, 2016, during which he was killed. James Dale Ritchie was posthumously identified as the serial killer responsible for 5 murders in Anchorage. The discovery of the Colt Python on his person linked him to the crimes, providing closure to the victims' families and ending a dark chapter in the city's history. Israel Keyes was a notorious American serial killer who committed multiple murders across the United States between 2001 and 2012. He meticulously planned his crimes, targeting random victims to avoid detection. His known victims include Bill and Lorraine Currier, who were abducted and murdered in Vermont in June 2011, and Samantha Koenig, kidnapped from a coffee booth in Anchorage, Alaska in February 2012. Keyes demanded ransom money after killing Koenig and disposed of her body in a lake. Keyes was captured in March 2012 after being tracked through ATM withdrawals from Koenig's account. While in custody, he confessed to several murders but committed suicide in December 2012, leaving behind a cryptic note and drawings suggesting more victims. Authorities believe he may have been responsible for up to 11 deaths. Israel Keyes' death left many questions unanswered, and his case remains a chilling reminder of the complexity of tracking serial offenders. In the quiet town of Wasilla, Alaska, 2 brothers vanished under eerie circumstances more than a decade apart. 15-year-old Michael Palmer disappeared on June 4, 1999 after a late-night bike ride home from a party. His bike and sneakers were found near the Little Susitna River, but Michael was never seen again. Despite rumors of foul play and extensive searches, his fate remains unknown. 11 years later, on April 10, 2010, Michael's brother Chucky went missing while snow machining near Talkeetna. His snow machine was discovered in deep snow with no footprints or helmet nearby. Despite thorough searches, no trace of Chucky has ever been found. The Palmer family is left with haunting questions and unresolved grief. What really happened to Michael and Chucky Palmer remains one of Alaska's unsolved mysteries. In the heart of Alaska, a fiery political figure met a mysterious end. Joe Vogler, founder of the Alaska Independence Party, was a man of strong convictions. On May 30th, 1993, he vanished from his Fairbanks home. His dogs were found locked inside, his famous fedora missing. Nearly a year later, convicted thief Manfred West confessed to killing Vogler in a botched explosive sale. Police discovered Vogler's remains in a gravel pit wrapped in a blue tarp. West was convicted, but many, including AIP members, believe there was a lot more to the story. Vogler was set to speak at the UN about Alaskan independence, raising suspicions about a possible conspiracy. Was Joe Vogler's death a simple crime or a deeper conspiracy? The mystery remains unsolved, leaving Alaskans to wonder what really happened. In 1972, a small plane vanished in Alaska carrying two U.S. congressmen, Hale Boggs and Nick Begich. Their disappearance remains one of the greatest aviation mysteries. On October 16, 1972, Congressman Hale Boggs and Nick Begich boarded a Cessna 310C in Anchorage, bound for Juneau. The weather was harsh, with forecasts of turbulence and icing. Pilot Don Johns, a seasoned bush pilot, took off despite the challenging conditions. 10 minutes into the flight, Johns radioed his flight plan. It was the last anyone heard from them. A massive search ensued, deploying hundreds of aircraft, including a SR-71 spy plane, but after 39 days, the search was called off. The plane, its passengers, and the pilot were never found. Speculations arose, including theories of a crash due to severe weather or even a bomb. Journalist John Walzak's investigation into the case uncovered potential foul play involving mobsters and a mysterious FBI probe. The fate of Hale Boggs and Nick Begich remains unsolved. Did weather bring them down, or was there a more sinister plot? The mystery endures, leaving more questions than answers. In a small ski town in Alaska, a mysterious disappearance left a family searching for answers. On July 1st, 1995, Erin Marie Gilbert attended the Girdwood Forest Fair on a first date with a man named David Combs. After leaving Anchorage around 4 p.m., the couple enjoyed the festival until 6 p.m., when Combs claimed his car battery died, leaving Gilbert alone while he searched for help. When he returned, he stated that Erin was gone. Despite extensive searches by her family and Alaska State Troopers, no trace of Erin was ever found. Over the years, her family posted a $35,000 reward in hopes of uncovering new leads, and numerous stories and podcasts have dug into the story, all to no avail. To this day, Erin's case remains unsolved, shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions. On July 4th, 2012, in Seward, Alaska, a routine mountain race turned into a haunting mystery. Every 4th of July, the town of Seward hosts the Mount Marathon Race, a grueling 3-mile ascent up a 3,000-foot mountain. That year's race saw 3 serious accidents, but the most baffling incident involved 66-year-old Michael Lemaitre, who somehow disappeared without a trace. Michael, an adventurous spirit, was running Mount Marathon for the first time. Despite not being a professional, he was determined to finish. Witnesses last saw him near the summit around 6 p.m. By then, race officials had already packed up. Michael, unfamiliar with the mountain, might have taken a wrong turn or faced other unknown dangers. Despite extensive searches by helicopters and volunteers, no trace of him was found. The mountain's challenging conditions, including loose shale, snow bridges, and steep cliffs, added to the mystery. Michael's daughter, Marianne Lemaitre, spent over a month searching, exploring every possibility, even considering bear activity or snow cover. Yet the mountain remains silent. The disappearance of Michael Lemaitre remains one of Mount Marathon's greatest mysteries. Will we ever uncover what happened on that foggy July day? In the icy wilderness of Alaska, a tragic hunting trip turned deadly for three men, revealing a dark and complex story. On January 25, 1970, Norman Butch Johnson was found by a pilot bloodied and exhausted, claiming his three hunting companions had been murdered. The young man had been gifted a rifle by his father and sent on a caribou hunt with three Inupiaq men near Kiana, Alaska. Butch initially blamed a mysterious snowmobiler, but under police interrogation, he confessed to the killings. He described how he fired multiple rounds into the tent, killing Frederick Jackson, Clarence Arnold, and Oscar Henry. His defense argued he suffered a psychotic break triggered by cultural isolation, extreme cold, and the graphic nature of the hunt. Despite his claims of temporary insanity, Butch was found guilty of 3 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. But shockingly, he was released on parole after serving only 4 years, leaving the small village of Kiana and the families of the victims in anguish. A tragic mix of mental illness and cultural clash led to an unimaginable loss. The story of Butch Johnson remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human mind. In the remote town of Bethel, Alaska, a day at high school turned into a nightmare no one could have imagined. On February 19, 1997, 16-year-old Evan Ramsey arrived at Bethel Regional High School with a hidden shotgun, a ticking time bomb fueled by years of torment and a broken home. Ramsey, bullied relentlessly and struggling with his past, made a decision that would forever change the lives of everyone around him. He entered the school and fatally shot Principal Ron Edwards, a respected Vietnam veteran and leader. Then he turned the gun on 16-year-old Josh Palacios, a beloved student and promising basketball player, before wounding 2 others. The school descended into chaos as terrified students and teachers fled for their lives. Art teacher Rain Athanas confronted Ramsey, trying to de-escalate the situation, but the damage was already done. The community of Bethel was left to grapple with the aftermath, forever scarred by the senseless violence. Evan Ramsey, now in his early 40s, reflects on his acts from behind bars, serving a 198-year sentence, haunted by his own regrets. The Bethel High School shooting remains a stark reminder of how unchecked pain and anger can erupt into tragedy, leaving a small town to pick up the pieces of shattered lives. In the remote wilderness of McCarthy, Alaska, the weekly mail plane was a lifeline for its 22 residents. On March 1st, 1983, this routine was shattered. The night before, Chris Richards welcomed his neighbor, Lewis Hastings, into his home. The next morning, Hastings returned with murderous intent, shooting Richards, who barely escaped into the freezing wilderness. Hastings then continued his rampage, heading to the Hegland's home, where residents gathered for the mail plane. There, he brutally murdered Les and Flo Hegland, Maxine Edwards, and later Tim and Amy Nash, who'd come to warn others. Hastings' motive was a delusional plan to destroy the Trans-Alaska Pipeline to preserve the wilderness. Alaska state troopers intercepted and arrested Hastings, ending his spree but leaving a deep scar on McCarthy. The town grappled with the loss of 6 residents and the trauma inflicted on survivors like Chris Richards and Donna Bryam. Hastings was sentenced to 634 years in prison, but the trust and tranquility of McCarthy were forever damaged. In Manly Hot Springs, Alaska, where the road ends and the icy Tanana River begins, drifter Michael Silka arrived on May 13, 1984. He seemed like just another wanderer, but he was about to unleash terror. Silka, with a troubled past and a history of violence, fled Illinois to avoid arrest. In Fairbanks, Alaska, his behavior grew more erratic, culminating in a neighbor's murder. Silka then fled to Manly Hot Springs. On May 17, 1984, 6 residents visited the boat landing at Manly Hot Springs, but never returned. Concerned relatives alerted the Alaska State Troopers, who discovered blood and drag marks at the landing. They realized Silka, a suspected murderer, was on a killing spree. Troopers located Silka's boat tied to a tree. When confronted, Silka opened fire, killing an Alaska State Trooper before being shot dead himself. The search revealed 4 bodies in the Tanana River, but 3, including a pregnant woman and her young son, were never found. Michael Silka's rampage ended the lives of 7 Manly residents and a trooper, possibly more. The motive behind his violent spree remains a mystery, leaving a scar on the small town of Manly Hot Springs. On September 7, 1982, the town of Craig, Alaska was jolted by smoke rising from the harbor a mile away. The source? A 58-foot fishing vessel named the Investor. As rescue teams arrived, they found the ship engulfed in flames. 8 people, including the ship's owner, Mark Colthurst, his pregnant wife Irene, their 2 children, and 4 young crew members were aboard. By the time the fire was extinguished, the remains of the victims were charred beyond recognition, leading investigators to believe the fire was set to cover up a brutal mass murder. Investigators soon determined that Mark and Irene Colthurst had been shot before the fire started. The other victims were presumed to have met similar fates, but the intense fire destroyed much of the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported seeing a mysterious man operating the Investor's skiff around the time of the murders, but the killer's identity remained elusive. 2 years later, John Kenneth Peel, a former crew member, was arrested and charged with the murders. Despite circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies linking him to the scene, Peel's trials ended in a hung jury and an eventual acquittal due to insufficient evidence. The lack of physical evidence and the destruction caused by the fire hindered the investigation, leaving many questions unanswered. Today, nearly 4 decades later, the Investor murders remain one of Alaska's most infamous unsolved crimes. Frank Colicurcio Sr. was a key figure in Seattle's organized crime scene, whose influence reached Alaska in the 1980s. His operations, centered around strip clubs like the Good Times and the Wild Cherry in Anchorage, brought illegal activities such as tax evasion and prostitution to the state. These clubs, notorious for skimming profits and avoiding taxes, funneled millions out of Alaska, depriving the state of significant revenue and entrenching corruption in the local business environment. Alaska law enforcement, overwhelmed by this crime wave, struggled to combat the sophisticated operations orchestrated by Colicurcio and his network. In 1991, Colicurcio, his son, and an associate were convicted of failing to pay taxes on the profits skimmed from their Alaskan clubs. Frank Colicurcio Sr.'s legacy crime in the 1980s left a lasting mark on Alaska, highlighting the challenges of combating multi-state organized crimes and its far-reaching consequences. Filthy Führer, formerly Timothy Lobdell, led the 1488s, a neo-Nazi prison gang notorious for its violent and racist ideology. Recently convicted of murder, kidnapping, and racketeering, Führer operated from Alaska's maximum security Spring Creek Correctional Center, orchestrating crimes both inside and outside prison walls. The gang, identified by swastika tattoos and the number 1488, engaged in drug sales, firearms trafficking, and brutal assaults. In 2017, Führer ordered the torture and murder of gang member Michael Staton to enforce discipline. Staton's gang tattoo was cut off with a hot knife before he was shot and his body burned. The federal trial revealed the gang's violent nature and extensive reach. All convicted members faced life sentences without parole. The convictions mark a significant blow to the 1488s, highlighting the persistent threat of organized crime and the crucial role of law enforcement in combating it. The Brothers Motorcycle Club, or BMC, was a prominent motorcycle gang in Anchorage, Alaska during the early 1970s. Formed in 1967, the brothers quickly gained a reputation for their activities and presence in the local area. By 1977, they'd established an association with the Hells Angels in California's San Francisco Bay Area. In December 1982, the brothers officially merged with the Hells Angels, establishing Hells Angels chapters in Anchorage and Fairbanks. This merger solidified their status as a support club for the Hells Angels, expanding their influence and reach. The brothers played a significant role in the Hells Angels' operations in Alaska, particularly in methamphetamine trafficking and other criminal enterprises. The brothers' motorcycle club's integration into the Hells Angels marked a significant chapter in Alaska's outlaw motorcycle gang history, with their activities leaving a lasting impact on the state's criminal landscape. In the early 1980s, Alaska witnessed its largest drug bust, dismantling a $36 million heroin empire led by a 55-year-old woman named Dora Sterling. Serving 300 to 400 customers daily, Sterling's operation was disrupted when state troopers raided her home. Sterling faced 15 counts of selling heroin, with potential penalties of 300 years in prison and $1 million in fines. The raid was part of a coordinated effort by 200 law enforcement agents, leading to 12 arrests in Anchorage and seizures of heroin, diluted, cocaine, and other drugs worth $1 million. Further arrests were made in Seattle and Los Angeles. Undercover operations revealed the scale of the ring, which involved theft and shoplifting to support users' habits. Sterling's arrest, along with her associates, marked a significant blow to Alaska's heroin supply, ending a notorious chapter in the state's history. Heraclio Sanchez Rodriguez, a 57-year-old inmate in a California prison, masterminded a massive drug trafficking ring from his cell, funneling fentanyl, meth, heroin, and cocaine into Alaska. Using contraband cell phones, he coordinated with suppliers in Mexico and brokers in California and Oregon. His network extended deep into Alaska, reaching even the most remote communities like Good News Bay and Savunga. Sanchez Rodriguez ran a ruthless operation. One of his top quote-unquote wives, Cristina Quintana, got inmates from Highland Mountain Correctional Facility to sell drugs when they got out. Other individuals did his violent tasks. In May 2023, they kidnapped 2 women, killed them, and buried them near Trapper Creek. The ring's violence didn't stop there. 2 other individuals distributed fentanyl that resulted in a fatal overdose. Over 2 years, a multi-agency investigation uncovered extensive drug trafficking and money laundering, leading to the indictment of 54 individuals. The crackdown disrupted a major criminal enterprise, but the scars of the fentanyl killings and the flood of drugs will linger in Alaskan communities for years. Alaska has a vast and disturbing criminal history, ranging from unresolved murders to serial killers, significant drug busts, and violent gang actions. These stories of tragedy, mystery, and justice reveal Alaska's darker side. Yet, as we reflect on these crimes, we also see the resilience of Alaskans who continue to overcome challenges and move forward. Yet the tales of the past serve as a reminder that while Alaska's beauty is boundless, so too are its dark stories.